And now it's my pleasure to introduce our featured speaker, Rachel Paulose, the managing attorney of the Upper Midwest Law Center. Now, Rachel is an American attorney. She was nominated by President George W. Bush and unanimously confirmed by the United States Senate. So she's serving as a United States attorney. She was the youngest person ever and the first woman to lead the District of Minnesota and the first Indian American woman to be nominated by a president and confirmed by the Senate for any federal position. So in 1994, she earned a BA summa cum laude from the University of Minnesota, where she was a Phi Beta Kappa and a Harry S. Truman Scholar. In any case, I'd like to introduce you to Rachel. I want you to understand she graciously came here this morning. Remember, Ken Beal was supposed to be our speaker and unfortunately had to bow out. And she came in to tell us what's going on at the Upper Midwest Law Center.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Good morning. We're so excited to be here. And so I'm also a fourth-generation preacher's kid. I understand that Mr. Beal was going to speak to you about the Judeo-Christian heritage in America. So we can talk about that afterwards, maybe. I also am accompanied by our senior appellate attorney at the Upper Midwest Law Center, Nicholas Nelson. And Nick will never tell you this, so I will. He is a superstar. He's a Notre Dame law grad, clerked for Judge Hardiman on the Third Circuit. If you recognize that name, it's because he's on President Trump's short list to be on the U.S. Supreme Court. Also clerked for Judge Stephen Murphy of the Eastern District of Michigan. Nick worked under many, many impressive attorneys, including the former Solicitor General of the United States, Paul Clement, was a partner at a number of big firms, and worked at Faegre and Benson here in Minneapolis. Did a lot of work for the Trump campaign, including defending President Trump's ballot access on primary ballot access here in Minnesota and across the nation. So he's done a lot of important work, especially in the appellate sphere across the country. And maybe most importantly, he is the happily married father of 11. And it's quite appropriate that we're in a Knights of Columbus Hall because he is a knight. So we're very excited to be here this morning to tell you about the really interesting work of the Upper Midwest Law Center. And I have a clicker, which I got a little too trigger happy on and tried to test earlier. Nick, I think you're tall enough that you're blocking everybody's view if you stand. Okay, perfect. So we wanted to just start by telling you a little bit about the background of the Upper Midwest Law Center. We were founded in 2019 by Dr. Doug Seaton, who is now managing us from both Minnesota and Florida, where he wisely goes during the winter months. And Dr. Seaton is also a really impressive labor law attorney who basically built his career busting corrupt unions in Minnesota, which, as you can imagine, is a hero's job in this part of the country. And he's a graduate of Princeton and has a PhD from Rutgers in labor relations. He decided to form the Upper Midwest Law Center basically to take on the establishment in Minnesota, knowing this would be a difficult environment in which to challenge the status quo, but deciding basically he was going to stand and fight in a place like Minnesota, and has been remarkably successful. So we are a nonprofit public interest law firm. We don't charge our clients one penny. And we're able to do that because of generous donations from people like you, and I'll talk more about that at the end of our presentation. We also work cooperatively with the leading think tank in the Upper Midwest. I'm sure you've heard of it, the Center of the American Experiment. And we've been going strong for about 7 years now. So I want to tell you a little bit about our litigation team, which is, I would say, small but mighty. And at the helm, of course, is Dr. Seaton. Nick leads all of our appellate work. I am heading up our litigation work, along with Brent Robbins. Brent is also a Yale grad, Vanderbilt Law. He was slated to become the general counsel of General Mills, which, as you know, is a Fortune 200 company, and had built his career there for about 30 years, and then decided it was time to join the movement. And so really kind of gave up what could have been a very lucrative continuing career where he would have made probably 20 times more than he's making right now to join us. And if you recognize his last name, yes, he is the husband of Representative Kristen Robbins. I love saying that. And will be a great first gentleman. I'm saying that in my private capacity, of course, in about another year, and has done a lot to help her as well as work at UMLC. Alexandra Howell is another litigation attorney, and like Nick, she also clerked for 2 federal judges, both of whom are also on President Trump's shortlist, Judge David Strauss of the 8th Circuit and Judge Diane Sykes of the 2nd Circuit. She's also a Notre Dame law grad and went to Hillsdale undergrad and has just been burning up the tracks for us on both litigation and appellate work. Austin Lissy is our junior associate who graduated from Chicago Kent, has been with us since he was a law clerk and just stayed with us from the summer on through. And he works remotely with us from Chicago, although we keep trying to convince him to join us in Minneapolis. Sue Nesheim and Cynthia Cajun are our staff support. Cynthia was actually introduced to us as a client and then liked working with UMLC so much she came on as a paralegal, and Nick is going to tell you a little bit more about her case. And Susan has been Doug's assistant for more than 40 years, which I'm sad to say is longer than most American marriages last in this country, but they've been together for a long, long time, and smart people know you don't mess with Susan in our office. Our board is comprised of people whose names you will well recognize being active in Republican circles. Ron Ebensteiner, of course, heads up Windcrest Capital. He's the chairman of the Center of the American Experiment, former state chair of the Minnesota Republican Party. John Hinderaker, also a lawyer by training, practiced at Faegre and Benson for decades, and is now the president of the Center of the American Experiment. And Robin Kelleher, who was Dr. Seaton's partner at his law firm and practices in labor and employment law and does a lot with us to help fundraise and basically keep us funded so that we can continue to offer our services at no cost to clients. We have an advisory legal panel of names that, again, you may recognize: Alec Beck, John Halpern, Tom Kelly, Dan Kleinberger, Rick Morgan, and Chuck Spevacek. So our mission is to basically stand and fight in Minnesota and beyond, and we are happy to take cases that go beyond Minnesota, but our focus is definitely here because there's plenty of work to do right here in Minnesota. We work to uphold the rule of law and keep big government in check. There are many areas in which we could focus, but if I had to pick the top 3 in which we specialize, it would be resisting government overreach and specializing in maintaining separation of powers, exposing and fighting union corruption, and standing for religious freedom. So we want to tell you a little bit about our case updates, and we think you'll find this particularly interesting. We picked basically 5 that we think are representative of the work that we do, and if I had to think of a theme for how well we're doing, we punch above our weight, and we win a lot. Do you recognize this clip?
We're going to win so much, you may even get tired of winning. And you'll say, please, please, it's too much winning. We can't take it anymore.
I love him.
So Rachel lets me do the fun job and tell you all about some of these wins. We've picked a couple that have already been wrapped up and that have been our headliners over the past few years, and I've got a few here that are ones that we're fighting now. So let me tell you about some of our big cases over the years. One is our defunding the police litigation. We heard from Ron earlier about the Minneapolis City Charter and some of the issues that came up around the death of George Floyd, and whether we were going to defund the police, right? So the Upper Midwest Law Center was in the middle of that in one sense, in that we looked at the Minneapolis City Charter right in the middle of the defund the police litigation, and noticed, gee, it says in here that Minneapolis has to have a police department, and has to there's even a formula that says you have to have so many police officers for 1,000 residents in Minneapolis. So we thought, boy, if they want to defund the police, they're going to be violating the charter. We filed a lawsuit about it, and we won even in the Minnesota Supreme Court, which said, yeah, Minneapolis has to have a police department. So if you're glad that there's still a Minneapolis Police Department, you can thank the Upper Midwest Law Center for that. Interesting, thing about this case is that it actually shows the need for careful lawyering and people who look at these things hard. The Minneapolis City Charter was revised or reworded, I think, in maybe the 1980s or a little bit after that. If you pull up the website, for what does the Minneapolis City Charter say, you actually won't find the language that says Minneapolis has to have a police department, because they put it into this sort of plain language, modern language. They didn't mean to change what the charter meant, but they changed the wording, and the result of it, I think it was unintended, but the result of it was to make it less clear that Minneapolis really was required to have a police department. So what the intrepid attorneys at UMLC did was went back and looked at the old city charter. What does that one say? Because the law is clear that it hasn't changed. The rules haven't changed. And that was where we saw, wow, this is really clear. Minneapolis has to have a police department. The Minnesota Supreme Court agreed with us. They said, yeah, if you look back at the old language, they definitely have to do this. So a good win for careful lawyering and a good win for our state. Now, as we've all probably heard recently, the Minneapolis Police Department still is not at the number of lawyers it should be at, and I think Rachel's going to talk with you about how we're bothered about that and we want to try to do something about it. But let's go to our, thank you. If you're clicking, Rachel, we can take us to the next one. Thanks. So yeah, next case is the one we're currently working on, which is we're challenging the massive omnibus bill that was passed at the very end of the left-wing trifecta in the legislature a couple years ago in 2024. If you were following the news at the time, you would have seen, again, left-wingers controlled every branch of the government for a couple of years. At the very end of that, the last day to pass legislation in the 2024 session, they had run out of time to get their legislation through for what they wanted to do that year. And so almost literally at the 11th hour, it was something like, 9:42 p.m. on the last day to pass legislation. What they did was they took 9 massive bills that had been working their way through the legislature, and they smashed them all together into what we think is the longest statute ever passed in Minnesota history. It's almost 1,500 pages long, and it covers everything under the sun. This was the one where they said, here's how Uber and Lyft have to pay their drivers. It said private health plans have to cover abortion. It said we've got new housing bills. We have to revise the residential building code so they use 70% less energy. They revised the paid family leave rules. They revised paid sick and safe time. I mean, I could stand here literally all day. When I read this bill, it took me 4 whole work days to do it. It was so long. So, I mean, yeah, sit down with a good novel, right? Basically is what it was like. So, bad stuff in the bill, right? But of course, bad stuff doesn't mean it's illegal stuff, and that's where you need lawyers to come in and figure out, is this legal? Turns out Minnesota's constitution is like many states. We have what's called a single subject clause, where our constitution says every law that the legislature passes has to cover just one single subject. I just told you what was in this bill. There is no way that covers a single subject. If it does, then any law you could ever think of would cover a single subject. So we at the Upper Midwest Law Center filed a lawsuit. We sued the state. We sued Governor Walz. We sued everybody else we could figure out to get a complaint served on, to say, yeah, not a single subject. Now, this reflects a challenge that we often face, which is, we can identify policy problems we want to solve. And oftentimes, we can come up with legal theories where we can say, yeah, we think we've got a chance to win in court and solve the problem this way. But there's a third ingredient that we need to file a winning lawsuit, which is we need a plaintiff. We need somebody who's willing to say, yeah, my name's going to be on this. Yeah, this directly affects me. And yeah, I'm willing to take the heat in the media, with my neighbors, on social media, wherever else, for doing this. Those of us who've joined Upper Midwest Law Center recently have been, I guess we might say, surprised to say it can be hard to find folks like that. Because it's easy to say, I don't like this. It's much harder when you think about, wow, what are people going to say when my name's in the newspaper? What are people going to say about this? Folks have reality checks about this. So we ran into that a little bit with the omnibus bill. We were looking for lots of different plaintiffs to sign up. We found one. We found the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus, who was willing to say, and this wasn't even part of the list of all the things that was in the bill that I just gave you, but it banned different kinds of firearms, right, in Minnesota. So one of them was binary triggers, where you pull the trigger, your gun shoots, you release the trigger, it shoots again. Those are now illegal in Minnesota, or they were, because we filed a lawsuit with the Gun Owners Caucus, and we got a district court in Ramsey County to strike down that provision as unconstitutional under the single subject clause. Great win. We were happy about it. We don't think that's nearly enough, because that's one paragraph out of 1,500 pages. We think all 1,500 pages need to go. So we're appealing. We'll be in the Court of Appeals on that in about a month here, asking for that. We're also looking at potentially bringing other lawsuits. The judge in our case said, I'm going to strike down this binary trigger ban. I know that UMLC has asked me to strike down the whole thing. I think that's going to require hundreds of lawsuits to get rid of this whole law. So our thought is, well, maybe we need to bring some of those hundreds of lawsuits, and we'll see. We'll be looking forward to trying to do that. So I'll quickly tell you about some of our First Amendment lawsuits that we've brought. One that I'll be in court in tomorrow morning, as a matter of fact, is Dr. Scott Jensen versus the Minnesota Board of Medical Practice. If you're here in this room, you're probably familiar with Dr. Jensen and his run for governor 4 years ago. What I was not as familiar with, just from watching the news, was the fact that for practically that entire campaign, he was under investigation. His medical license was under investigation by the State Board of Medical Practice. I see the hand up for 5. Yes, 5 different investigations were opened by the State Board of Medical Practice, and every single one of them, they told him, were they investigating how he treated his patients? No. Were they investigating what he has said to his patients? No. They told him right in the letters, the Board of Medical Practice, we're investigating your TV interviews, we're investigating your social media posts, because we don't like that you're criticizing the guy who appointed us, Governor Walz, right, and what the state government is doing. So I look at this when I, join Upper Midwest Law Center, and I think, my goodness, this is the United States of America. This is the kind of thing you hear about happening in, other countries far away that don't have functioning democracies. We have a First Amendment. We have the freedom of speech here in the United States. You're supposed to be able to criticize the government without them taking away your livelihood. So we filed a First Amendment lawsuit on behalf of Dr. Jensen. We got a ruling that we obviously disagree with at the district court, basically saying, well, they didn't actually revoke his medical license, so it's fine that they did this investigation. It's fine that they made him hire a lawyer. It's fine that they made him submit all these things justifying himself. We strongly disagree with that, and we are very hopeful that the appeals court will too. That's what I'll be talking about tomorrow. Next one, let's talk about Black Lives Matter posters, right? This was how our good friend and colleague Cynthia Cajun came to work for us. As Rachel mentioned, she started out as our client, as one of those brave plaintiffs who was willing to step forward and bring a lawsuit. Her school district, which was Lakeville, had a wall in their school somewhere where they let the Black Lives Matter movement put up posters saying Black Lives Matter. Cynthia and her husband thought that it would be good to also have a statement, I think that Blue Lives Matter or something else, or All Lives Matter, something else along those lines, but was told by the school district, oh no, that's not a message that we want to allow here. Now, of course, school districts have some control over what gets said in classrooms, but if they just open it up and say, hey, people can post posters here, which is what they did for the Black Lives Matter movement, they can't pick and choose winners and losers, right? That's where the freedom of speech comes in. So we at UMLC filed a lawsuit on behalf of the Cajuns saying, hey, you know what, if you're gonna let some outside speakers come in and put up posters, you've gotta let the Cajuns do it too. And we reached a settlement in that case that we felt was good at vindicating their rights and getting done what we needed to do. And we now have another well-valued colleague in Cynthia Cajun. Last one I'll tell you about is religious freedom. And in particular, our Northland Baptist Church case. This harks way back to the COVID lockdowns, a time in history that I would like to forget about, but that, you know, some legal issue or other keeps reminding me of it every day, whether it's Dr. Jensen or whether it's this one or whether it's something else. As we all remember, you know, everything was locked down during COVID, at least at the beginning, and then things started opening again. You know, whether it was stores or whether it seemed like everybody was saying they were an essential business. A swimming pool guy told me they were an essential business, and I thought, really? Anyway, I was glad they could operate their business, but a real problem was that churches were not allowed to reopen for a long time, and when they were, it was under severe restrictions. That seemed like a significant problem to a lot of people who wanted to go to church and pray, and it seemed like a significant problem to us at the Upper Midwest Law Center. So we filed a lawsuit saying, wait a minute, you know, churches cannot be the bottom of the barrel, the ones who are regulated the most severely. Under the law that's established, they have to be treated as well, at least as well as everybody else. So if you're going to let people go to the grocery store, if you're going to let people go to the nail salon, if you're going to let people hire people to, you know, maintain their swimming pools, you got to let people go to church. You have to let people call their pastors in to minister to them. You have to let people do these things. We got a pretty good ruling in the district court, and then after some more litigation, we actually managed to enter a public settlement agreement with the state government that said, yeah, we won't do this again. If we let people into grocery stores, we'll let them come into church on the same terms. You can actually look that up online. That'll be, thank you, yeah. So our plan A is to not have any more lockdowns, but God forbid should they happen, we'll be able to get into church on the same terms as any other building. We've got more coming, more important work. We're working hard every day, and I think Rachel's going to tell you about some of the cases we're working up right now.
Thank you, Nick. So as you can see, for such a small firm, we are extremely busy. And we're winning, and we're getting great results even in very difficult jurisdictions, including in Minnesota State Court, where almost all of the judges have been appointed by a Democrat governor. But we're not resting on our laurels. We're still thinking about what's the next big case, what are the next important issues to pursue, what will be important for the people of this state to vindicate your rights and to continue to just be freedom fighters for all of you. And so unfortunately, we used to be a state where we took a lot of pride in our public life and I think in our sense of propriety, and now we are known globally as a land of 10,000 frauds. That is not something that we are happy about at UMLC, and that is something that we are trying to actively fight. The fraud, and I'm sad about what's happening in the U.S. Attorney's Office. Certainly grateful for their leadership as someone who is an alum of that office. For the $9 billion fraud story and counting, there's still more out there. We are hearing about stories of retaliation and abuse against really courageous whistleblowers who came forward to complain about what was happening in the state and who were themselves persecuted for just telling the truth. One of the really sad aspects of this is under Minnesota state law, there is no criminal protection for whistleblowers. So unlike in federal law, whistleblowers are pretty much on their own. If they report and if there's some sort of retaliation, they need lawyers to represent them. And we're putting our hand up and saying we are happy to take that on. And we would, in fact, be proud to represent people who've stood for truth in this cesspool. And so, again, we need your help. If you know of people, whether they work at DHS or they're aware of the fraud or they're aware of fraud yet to come, which I'm terribly afraid of, that we haven't yet heard of, we would love to hear from you. And please feel free. Nicholas and I both have cards, but you can read about us on the web as well. We would love to hear from you. Please get in touch with us if you know of anyone who needs our help. We stand ready and available. We are not happy about what is happening in the city of Minneapolis, and as Nicholas described, the Minneapolis Police Department is still understaffed. So based on current population count, the city of Minneapolis is required to have about 731 police officers. In fact, the number today stands at a little bit over 600. That is well under what the city is required to have. We have reached out to the city and we have expressed our concerns about this, and they are defiant. In fact, they're kind of proud of where they stand right now, and as you can see from nightly news reports, they're overwhelmed. They don't even have enough police to secure evidence at scenes where there has been violent activity. In fact, when DHS came out here a couple of weeks ago for Operation Metro Surge, the number of federal agents dwarfed the number of Minneapolis police officers, and that's just sad. Meanwhile, crime rates are rising. Downtown Minneapolis is still not back. We'd like to do something about this, and we need your help. Are you a resident of the city of Minneapolis? Do you have a business in the city of Minneapolis? And if you can answer yes to either of those questions, would you please come up and talk to us afterwards? Because we would love to have you put your name on a lawsuit to challenge what is happening in what was once a beautiful city that needs to be restored. And finally, as Nick mentioned, this log rolling bill that just has, it's the mother of all disasters in terms of legislative bad stories. We are looking at follow-up challenges, and we're talking to everybody from residential home builders to private businesses about what can be done to challenge the 1,500 or 1,400 page omnibus bill that was passed. So again, if any of the travesties that Nick mentioned impact you or your business or your family, and you think we could help you, we would love to talk to you. So we will both be here and available, and we'll also leave our contact information so that you can get in touch with us if it's not convenient for you to speak to us right after. But we are always on the lookout for good cases, and as he mentioned, good clients who are courageous enough to stand for truth in a difficult environment. But we need your help, and there are at least 3 ways that you can help us. So first of all, we are a 501c3 organization. That means your gifts to us are completely tax deductible. We have some people who send us $5 a month every month, and we are just so grateful that they would think of us that way. So whatever you are able to give, large or small, we would really appreciate you remembering us. We also are always on the lookout for clients, for new cases, and we want to challenge the status quo here. We have not given up on Minnesota. We're grateful for people like Ron Schutz, who are willing to enter the fight, and Ron has been fighting even before he became a political candidate on important public policy issues. We're trying to restore the rule of law here in Minnesota. If you have ideas on ways we can do that with good cases, good clients, please, we would really love to hear from you. And finally, we're constantly on the road. I think Mr. Muirhoff was asking me before this presentation, how often do you get out in the community? And between media appearances and community engagements, I'm probably out somewhere between 5 to 6 times a week. it's a big part of what I do, and I love it. I'm an extrovert, as you can probably tell, and I like people. I like engaging with people, but we're constantly seeking ways to meet new people. And so if you have ideas on places that we can speak and meet new friends, you can never have too many friends. So help us meet some of your friends as well. We would be grateful for that. And I think I've probably hit time. Thank you for your attention. We really appreciate you taking the time to listen to us.
Yeah, they'll be able to answer some of your questions if we've got a few minutes for questions.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Regarding the police department in the city of Minneapolis, they are understaffed. They've been playing that game for a long time. Because the city is Democrat and they just are going to hell. I grew up in Minneapolis. Can the city council play with the numbers? In other words, if they're supposed to have 731 police, can they say, well, yeah, they're on the police force, but they don't go out and actually do police work? Can they play with that, and have they tried to play with that?
The answer to the second question, probably they have tried. Can they? That's something we would ask the courts to decide. This is actually probably a couple steps down the road, because right now everyone agrees they don't actually have the 731 or the 713. So probably step one would be, look, let's at least get to that number, right? And then we can fight about what they're doing. But I mean, as Rachel said, defiance, right, is the attitude. So, there's not a lot of transparency about even the 600 people who are there, what are they doing, right? And these would be things, when you get into a lawsuit, you get tools to discover this stuff, which might be interesting. Anything to add, Rachel?
We need to get to step one, as Nick said.
First question is easy. Rachel, what's your last name?
Paulose.
Paulose. Okay. The next one is.
That was very easy.
Well, get ready for the next one.
Okay.
You're already zeroing in on the fraud that's occurred. But now we have something called paid family and medical leave.
Oh, okay.
So how far into this will you folks have to start investigating this? Because this is going to be like, compared to the fraud we've already seen, that's going to be like a Sunday afternoon pickpocket. And I just wondered if you're prepared for that. Thank you.
So you're touching on a couple of different kinds of problems that we have to deal with. One problem that we frequently run into is, well, is this a problem that you can solve with the litigation tool, or is it a problem that, really has to be solved at the ballot box, right? Justice Scalia, a great hero of many of ours, likes to say that I wish, as a Supreme Court justice, that I had a stamp that I could put on laws that would say stupid but constitutional, right? Because we live in a free country. We can, if we want to vote for people who are going to do stupid things, we can. So that's one question is, can we fix a problem by pointing out that it's illegal, or do we have to say this is just a really bad idea? Now, another problem, is there going to be fraud in people taking leave? Sure seems like it, right? Because it's it's sort of an open door in the same way that some of the state programs are. But another problem we run into is, how do we make a precedent? How do we aggregate the litigation so that we can actually solve a problem with the lawsuit? You can recover from one person who's committing fraud, right? But how do you stop the fraud going forward? How do you fix that problem, right? So that's something that we'd be looking at. I'm going to be honest, I don't have the answer on this one yet, right? So and sometimes there is no answer, right? Sometimes it goes back to the ballot box. And then of course there's the finding the plaintiff and making it work that way as well. We are looking at it for sure. My boss tells me to say, which is true.
Yes, sir.
So, speaking of stupid but constitutional, what about sanctuary cities and sanctuary state? Is there anything we can do about that? It's ridiculous that we don't work together, local law enforcement with federal. Are we heading to a civil war or what?
Well, God forbid that we should be headed to a civil war. I mean, it's a really interesting question, and I think I've spoken a lot about this to the media. I think that that issue was squarely presented in the lawsuit that Attorney General Ellison has filed against the Trump administration to stop Operation Metro Surge. I wish that there were a way for UMLC to challenge that, but unfortunately, I don't think there's really you have to have a thing called standing to file a lawsuit in federal court. You have to have a way to demonstrate that you have a personal stake in it that's beyond kind of a theoretical interest. And so really it has to be the government that challenges that. And right now you've got the state and the federal government at loggerheads with each other. But we agree, and it's a concern of ours. And I think in some ways the police defunding suit that we brought to restore funding and staff to the city of Minneapolis was our way of, in one way, challenging the sanctuary city policies. But it's a serious problem. And I spoke on a call about this, I think it was last week, to our donor base. And one of the things I said was, we thought this question was settled with a civil war. States, there are certain areas where federal law is supreme, including in immigration enforcement. That really should not continue to be a fight today.
So I have a question before I pass it on to you. I noticed on the omnibus bill, it mentioned that there's a statute of limitations. Can you tell me what that means?
Yeah, so a statute of limitations is the legislature says, hey, if something bad happens to you, we don't want you waiting 30 years, 40 years to come into court about it. People forget what happened. It's hard to prove after that long of a time. And also people need to understand, need to have some idea of what they might be liable for or not be liable for. An issue that's come up with statutes of limitations recently is when there have been child sex abuse scandals, and whether it's a church or whether it's the Boy Scouts or whoever else, legislatures will be upset about this and will pass a statute saying, yeah, we know this stuff happened 10 years, 20 years, 30 years ago. We're going to reopen the statute of limitations and let people file suit again anyway, even though they would have been time barred before. So you may have seen it in the news that way. But to challenge a statute, to sue in court and say, hey, this statute is no good, I want the court to strike it down. In Minnesota, the standard time period is 6 years. So that would be sort of the time limit for a 2024 omnibus bill. Obviously, that would give a few years yet, right? Now, the state is arguing on appeal, in our case, that the time limit should be much shorter, and to be honest, they're kind of making it up, and they're asking the courts to make it up and to say that, well, you really only get a few months to do this, and the time window's closed already. But those are the issues in play.
Yeah, I have a question first of all, your guys' battle that you're going on from saving Minnesota is just such reassuring. It just really does my heart good, so thank you very much. One thing I find that I keep looking for, that I find a lot of people that are good-intentioned people, that it seems like a topic that doesn't come up. They don't want to address it, and that is voter fraud. I'm going to throw out some things here, whether perfectly correct or not, but it seems like we have a lot of things that go against really having election integrity in Minnesota, such as driver's license for everybody. I became an election judge because I wanted to understand it a little bit more. And the first thing in my training, they talked about the voucher program, which I raised a red flag for me, and I watched it in practice. The person that that vouches for them doesn't have to show really any credentials that they're even legit who they're vouching for. I mean, that they are a voucher. So then they can vouch for 8 people, and then those 8 people can go vouch for people. And if you see that before elections, that the 300,000 people are all of a sudden new voters right before the election. Again, the license that I talked about, the Medicare, if you're an illegal immigrant, you get Medicare, and that they can vote in elections. It just goes on, the number of the things that you can stack up. That's something that people don't attack. Now, the Republican Party has asked, well, give us more money so we can go door knock to try to get more people to be Republicans. Well, I'm going, well, what does it matter? I mean, you can get more people maybe to vote for Republican, but if they can cheat, they can always add as many as they need to win the election. But why isn't that is something that we want to, that we can bring to light and try to improve on?
I'm really glad you asked, because this is something that we're actually looking very hard at. If you follow us in the news, you'll probably see in the next couple of months, we likely will be launching a couple of lawsuits related to election integrity. We're looking to, without giving away any secrets here, we're looking to secure voter rolls. We're looking to actually help election judges get into polling places. Thank you for those of you who said you are election judges. We're looking to expand that access. And I think that's really important. I mean, people, because there are many people who share your concerns and who feel like what's going on with our elections. I think one of the top things they can do, get in there, be there sitting there when the votes are being counted so you can see what's going on, and raise the red flag if you see something. So we're looking to expand those opportunities as well, and we hope to be filing litigation about that soon.
I've long had the impression that the trial and conviction of Derek Chauvin and the other Minneapolis police officers was a case of injustice. Are you looking at that at all, or is there anything that we can do?
That is not something that we would be able to look at because he's being represented by other attorneys right now, but I'm aware that there are other people representing him in that situation. Yes, ma'am.
I don't have a question for you, just something that I think you should focus on, something other than the police officer thing, because the way Minneapolis is bleeding residents, they're going to be down to that level where the number of police they have now.
I'll move my 11 children in and we'll fix that problem.
Yes, sir.
To the person who was talking about Derek Chauvin's case, yes, it was a horrible injustice. He does have an attorney. It is being represented to the court, and there are little cards at the back table where you can give, send, go directly to his legal fund. Pick one up on your way out. Send him some money, because the first one was paid for by the police union. Anything after that, he has to cover. So I've been giving these cards out for 3 years. Pick one up on your way out and send him some money. It's coming back up in trial, but it's much different. They have to bring new evidence, new cases, new points of interest. So it's a challenge, but it is moving forward, and he does have a good attorney. Pick that up and make him happy.
Yes.
I'm a taxpayer in Minnesota, and I'm wondering if it's possible to do a lawsuit against our leaders for allowing the fraud to happen and recoup some of our tax dollars.
So we have actually looked at that theory of the law. When Nick mentioned the kinds of things that we need to bring a lawsuit, one is a viable theory. And it's, again, without giving too much away, it's difficult under the legal strictures that we have to just say in general that a taxpayer has standing to challenge fraud. So that's why we're looking specifically at whistleblowers and people who have tried to expose the fraud and been punished for speaking the truth. We think that's the best chance for a winning lawsuit right now. But I appreciate your speaking up, and I wish more people who had spoken up were listened to years ago. Thank you so much again. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. We're really blessed to have you both come this morning.
Republican Seniors of Minnesota. For more information, please visit republicanseniorsmn.com. While visiting our website, you can click on the video tab to watch videos of past meetings. Also, Look for other tabs that bring you to our live player and other video programs. Or, on YouTube, search for Republican Seniors of Minnesota